And so, yes, I had 2 days of that. I've been doing a lot of I've been doing voiceovers for a long time. I'm now at the point where I also cast them and direct them, and I have a little bit like you. I have a home studio and record some of them there, and there are various other studios I'll record in around
Do you do anything voiceovers for cartoons or anything like that?
I'm one of the voices of the Great Aussie Bush Show, so any listeners who, particularly if you go to the races, I know it gets booked into a lot of race. There's a race meeting on today, isn't there?
Is there?
A big...
But there is. I saw a picture on Facebook.
Yes, I saw people on the train all dressed up with their fascinators and on the like.
Fascinating.
Fascinating.
Yes, that's not a cartoon as such, but it's puppets and things, and I'm the voice of one of the birds in that, Cocky Cockatoo.
Can you do it for us?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm Cocky Cockatoo.
That's awesome.
You'll find him online if you want to look at what Cocky Cockatoo looks like.
Have you got another voice? What's another character?
Oh goodness. Well, again, Google me and the word voice. You always have to add the word voice, otherwise you get information about my distant relative, the Governor General.
That's what came up when I said
oh my God, the Governor General's coming today?
Yes, what a coup. But I have a number of the character voices are on my reel, which you can find online. Of course, when you put together a voice reel, you always have to have the straight reads at the front and then the character reads at the end, because about 90% of voice work in Melbourne is just speaking to you as I'm speaking now. The exception is to voices like Cocky Cockatoo, or the very first one I ever got paid to do was when I was in the Comedy Festival, and it was opening night, and I noticed a very particular laugh, and I knew that belonged to a certain critic, and I kind of knew her, and I didn't see her afterwards, so I phoned and said, "Thank you for coming along. I heard your very supportive laugh." And she said, "Well, actually, Michael, that wasn't me. There must be someone who has the same laugh. But it's interesting that you phoned. Do you think you could do the voice of a Zen monk?" And I said, I wouldn't have thought so. And she said, well, it's for a radio commercial. The money's pretty good. And I said, I think I could do the voice of a Zen monk. So I went into St Kilda, not a million miles again from where we're sitting. And so that was one of the other exceptions, a character voice.
What does a Zen monk sound like?
This is what when I hung up the phone, I thought, how do I do the voice of a Zen monk?
Do you have to come up with it, or did she have some sort of a guide?
Well, she said...
That's part of the job, is it? To be creative about what it's going to be.
Partly, but she said, "Are you familiar with Yole and Lim?" Now, do you remember the commercials for Yole and Lim, Health with Harmony?
No.
Without drugs, without side effects. I'm deliberately not putting on the quote-unquote Asian voice. Yole and Lim actually is Asian.
No.
It did occur to me, why aren't they casting an Asian actor to play an Asian character? Or someone who is a monk, perhaps, yes. But anyway, so I did my best Yole and Lim impersonation. And they put a bit of reverb and some wind chimes in the background. Apparently the client was very happy. So the check cleared, so I wasn't complaining.
Can you do it for us?
Apologies in advance to anyone who is offended by this, but as I say, I wanted the gig and I wanted the money.
We have a pretty Caucasian following, I
think.
Cool.
Hello, I am Zen monk. I believe in search for inner peace. One must take control. Come to the Mind and Body Expo. It was a little accurate. It was a little better than that.
It was actually good. I could see the depth in the accent. I could feel the monk. I
felt the Tibetan mountains coming.
Did you?
Yeah, I really did.
The rush of the glaciers.
Yeah, I really did.
That's good.
Yes, well done.
I'm really bad with accents. Like, I can't really, even if I want to, I'm in the middle of a joke or something and I need to put on a German accent or something, I'm really a Russian. It's like, I'll only hit it every so often. I can't do it on cue.
Yeah.
I have to practice it, you know? It takes a bit of practice, surely, doesn't it?
I think it's partly practice,
yeah,
yes.
surely.
How do you get a job
some
for
people
voiceovers?
can do it really well.
Some people just have nice voices, or some people are here going, "Oh yeah, I've got an interview for a voiceover." I'm like, "Oh really? You don't have an interesting voice? Maybe I could do that."
Yeah.
You know?
A lot of it is who you know. I mean, for example, with this project I'm working on at the moment that I'm directing for beauty therapy, they wanted a woman. And I had a few demos. I also record demos.
You do the woman's voice?
No, I can't. I have done. Very occasionally one gets, like for example, if they only have two actors in the studio and it requires a man and a woman, so sometimes a man will put on the voice. I mean, the voice of Bart Simpson is voiced by a woman, so it does happen, but it's the exception. What I did, I had couple of demos on file, and so when I was approached about putting together a quote for this job, I said, well, here are 2 actors I think would be great for the project. And they came back, it was only after hearing samples that they were able to say, no, now we're able to clarify what we want. We want someone who sounds 20s. We want someone who doesn't make, this is an interesting choice of words, any vocal selections that sound stuck up. So which means they want broad vowel sounds. They don't want someone broad vowel sounds, sound more working class. That's what they wanted. And seeing was beauty therapy, we want.
So you'd have to work on that?
No, I had to find talent who was right. So I actually went to one of the voice clients that I record for. Again, not a million miles away from where we're sitting, RMIT English Worldwide. That's an ESL, English as a Second Language provider. And I went to them and said, is there anyone you could recommend? So getting back to your point, how do you get into it? It's usually through recommendations. Who you know.
Sure.
So they all had demos. I got about half a dozen of them and submitted them to this beauty therapy client without the names. Because sometimes if you have the name of an actor, that can influence a choice.
Yeah.
So it was artist 1, artist 2.
Just listen to the voice.
Just listen to the voice. And they came back and said, yes, artists 4 and artists 5 would like custom demos. So they came down to my, similar to this, home setup with recording, and they each did 3 short scripts.
And did you write them, or did the beauty place provide those? The
beauty place provided those,
yeah.
But now that we're up and running, when the scripts arrive, often there are little changes that need to be made, and I do have some input to that. Yes, yeah. Or just to make it clearer, or to make the copy more voice ready, as is mentioned in the trade. So they had the custom samples, and they selected. It was artist 4 they went for.
Oh, good on them.
Good old artist
4.
And so now we're 104 scripts in, and we've got about another 600 to go. I said to her the other day when we were recording, I never knew there was so much to learn about how to be a beauty therapist, but apparently.
So wait, what do you mean? How many you've got to go? So what is she providing the scripts for and the voiceovers for? What?
The client sends the scripts to me. I go through them and see how long a session we're going to need, for example, 3 hours. Then I phone up the voice talent and say, look, I've got another 20 pages we've got to record. This lot are on pedicures and acrylics.
So this is for an ad?
This is for online e-learning.
E-learning,
like Open University, that sort of thing.
Sure.
It's a regional Queensland client. So a lot of the people who are learning this...
It's a regional Queensland client.
Yes.
That's why you needed to drop the stuck-up accent.
Well, possibly. Often you'll find on briefs it'll say no Melbourne or Sydney voices, or no Melbourne or Sydney voice choices, or anything like that. So you find some that want more of a polished sound, more of an educated voice, and some who don't. So it's in my interest to be able to provide as many different options for different clients as possible. So we're
like a recruiter.
Yes, that sort of thing. Yeah. And also I get to direct them in terms of some sort of the liaison between the client and the talent.
Yeah.
So yes, the scripts come through, the talent comes down to my studio, we record them, I email them back. Again, I'm the intermediary if there are any notes, if they want anything done differently, and I put that in the nicest possible terms to the talent. And so we're doing them modules, is what they call them in educational reads, module by module. So we have an acrylic module, we have the pedicure module, and so on.
Sure.
So we're only about a sixth of the way in, if that.
Yeah. So that's
a lot of reading, and a lot of listening, and a lot of.
Have you learned anything about beauty therapy?
I'm learning all sorts of new words,
in northern Queensland.
All sorts. None. I don't think any specific to northern Queensland, like petrissage and effleurage and topotement.
Oh my god!
For example, when you put topotement into the online pronunciation dictionary, it says topotement, or in French, topoment. And you know they've said no vocal choices that sound stuck up, so you think, it'll be topotement, not topoment. So yes, and squoval, as you were saying.
Squoval.
People who are listening to this, we were chatting before we started recording, one of the words in some of the copy was squoval, and I asked the client what that meant, and he said, well, that's to do with filing the nails. It means half square and half oval. Squoval. So next time you're having a beauty
half square and half what?
Oval.
Squovals.
So, like, actually, I just filed one of my nails before. I think I might have done a squoval.
Without even knowing it?
Yeah, because, you know, it was a bit like that.
Yes.
I made it, like, a bit square, but then a tiny bit rounded on the square
I tell you what.
Looks pretty squoval to me.
Yes, I agree.
It's like squoval. So, not square, not oval. So, like,
That's
you
right,
know,
Sean.
someone just
Glad you've grasped
someone
it.
chubby. You got a chubby female.
A chubby female.
You could say they're squoval because they're not skinny. They're not. Sorry. Anyway,
I think you're on your own on that one, Sean.
That's valid.
It's valid.
But I can see where you were coming from.
Yes, we appreciate the effort, Sean.
Best intentions. Okay. So that's interesting. So, do you know what I've always been interested in with you write, and then
yes.
sometimes you act. But I've always thought, look, well, they don't have much to do. They've got to read the scripts and they've got to memorise them. But you would have to develop a good relationship with being able to read and memorise. Like, I watch a lot of movies,
yeah,
and I just don't. Like, how long does it take for you to be able to, like, read something over and like, because if you're a seasoned actor and you've got movies on the go and yada yada and like,
how do you remember that?
How do you just remember it and then go in and just being able to recite it? Are a lot of movies, I've always thought, look, it's got to be word for word, that's it, that's the way it's going to be. In some scenes actually, you know, it doesn't need to be word for word, you can sort of improvise a touch. Like, is there a different type of movies or productions or whatever that you can improvise a bit if you're getting stuck up, or if you don't need to know them, you just need to know the general gist? Or
it certainly does vary from project to project. The last feature I made was a feature called Infinite Shades of Grey, which was on here at the Westgarth Palace.
It's about bondage.
No, it was actually about about drug use, really, and it was produced by an organisation called Moreland Hall, which helps people who have those sorts of issues. And this was a harm minimisation film, so sort of an educational film. I've made a great many educational films. I'm sort of Australia's own Troy McClure. But this was a feature-length one. And getting back to your question about how scripted things are, there wasn't a script. There was an outline for each scene. And the actors, like Ken Loach in England, you would rehearse it a couple of times, but not too many times, because they wanted the feeling of immediacy and real. I was the head of the English department. I wasn't one of the ones using the drugs. I don't tend to be cast in those sorts of roles. I'm usually the concerned teacher or father whose younger person is using the product. So sometimes it's very specific. They want word for word. You might have changed one word and they'll come over and say, actually, you said such and such.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That sounds awful, because, I mean, I suppose when it gets to... if it gets to the point where it's sort of like you miss one word and they come over... Everything becomes a bit more complicated because it's like, well, I need to do this facial expression, I need to act like this, and then I need to get every word right, and then it sort of becomes more generic rather than you know, if you can improvise just a bit, then you can get more of your inner self out.
You would think you'd get the best result by giving that actor the benefit of the doubt of doing the job. We want to get across this message. We want to, you know, generally like this, but at the end of the day, your art is to be able to get the message across in your way. So do it, you know.
But how often
is that not done much?
It varies from project to project. I mean, doing a lot of educational projects, for example, they don't like you ad-libbing sometimes because it's much harder for them having to put the subtitles on. If you're doing it exactly as scripted, then they've already got that on the system. They don't have to go through and change it all. Also with education, like on Friday I was recording assessment materials that are going to be used in an exam. Well, for those it is very important that you be precise, because if they're being tested on English as a second language, they've got to know exactly, the script has got to be as it's scripted.
Well,
So sometimes, I mean, you were saying in terms of getting the message across and the performance, that seems to be less of the goal sometimes with educational projects than it is with entertainment ones. Exactly.
But with movies, you think that, you know, you got Brad Pitt coming on, just give him the job and let him do it. You know, that's his thing. But how much would the director be involved in telling him exactly what, you know?
It varies from director to director.
If you're in the top 100 actors in the world, surely they would have the sort of that they would be the sort of person who would be like, well, you're just going to have to let me,
Yes.
They wouldn't take on a contract where it was so strict that they
wouldn't be told what to do.
They've proven themselves, they're good to go.
Yeah.
If you're one of the top 100 actors in the world, you would also have a producer credit, so you'll be able to have some sway in terms of how it was being done.
Of course.
So, but the life of the jobbing character actor in Melbourne, which is more what I am, not quite in the top 100 in the world, but that's more of,
teetering on the edge.